All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to unpack a really foundational idea in modern economics, the basic intertemporal model. And to guide us, we'll be leaning on the great work of Carlos Veg and Alberto Ortiz.
But before we get into how whole countries work, let's make this personal. Imagine you get a surprise, one-time bonus from work. Pretty nice, right? What do? Maybe you splurge a little, go on that vacation, buy that new phone you've been eyeing. But now, what if, instead, you got a permanent raise? Same amount of money, just spread out, coming in every single paycheck forever. You'd probably think differently, wouldn't you? You'd likely adjust your whole lifestyle. That difference, how you treat a temporary windfall versus a permanent change, is absolutely key. So just hang on to that thought.
Because believe it or not, entire countries face that exact same kind of choice. They're constantly deciding how to manage their resources, not just for today, but for tomorrow and for all the years to come. That's really the heart of it all, making choices across time.
And this is where we see a massive fork in the road. On one side, you've got a closed economy. Think of it like a household that can only spend what it earns right now. But an open economy, well, it can do something kind of magical. It can trade across time. It can actually borrow from its future self to build a better present.
So let's break that down. A closed economy is really boxed in by the here and now. If it wants to invest in something new, say a factory or a bridge, it has to be paid for with money it has saved up today. But an open economy is playing a totally different game, a much longer game. It can fund those huge projects or just get through a tough year by borrowing from the rest of the world. It's balancing its books over a lifetime, not just for the next quarter. And that ability is a complete game changer.
Now, to really get how this works, economists love to build models. You can think of a model as a simplified, kind of perfect little world where we can strip everything away and just look at the most important forces at play. So let's step into one of these ideal worlds and see what it has to tell us.
Okay, so this perfect world, what economists might call a first best world, it runs on some pretty wild assumptions. We pretend that people live forever, which really just means they care a whole lot about the future. We assume they know exactly what's going to happen. No surprises, no uncertainty. They can borrow or lend as much as they want on the world market, no questions asked. And to keep it simple, there's only one type of good and no government getting in the way. Now, obviously, this isn't reality, but it creates a perfect laboratory to test our ideas.
And inside this perfect laboratory, something amazing happens. We get the model's single most important prediction, and it's called consumption smoothing. It basically says that a country doesn't have to ride this wild roller coaster where everyone's spending collapses just because the economy had a bad year. Instead, it can use the world's financial markets to borrow when times are tough and save when times are good, keeping the standard of living nice and stable over time.
So we have this perfect, stable model humming along. But what happens when we mess with it? What happens when we hit this ideal economy with a shock? This is where things get really interesting.
First, we gotta understand that not all shocks are the same. A temporary shock is like that one-time bonus we talked about. It's just a blip, a bad harvest one year, or a short-term spike in oil prices. But a permanent shock, well, that's like getting that permanent raise. It changes everything for the long haul. Think about discovering a huge new natural resource or inventing a brand new technology. The whole game has changed.
And this brings us right back to our first question. If the shock is temporary, like a bad harvest, the model says the country should just borrow to keep everything smooth. Why should everyone have to suffer just because of one bad year? You finance the shortfall and you pay it back when things are good again. But for a permanent shock, the logic is totally different. If your income has fundamentally changed for good, you can't just borrow your way through it. You have to adjust. You have to find a new, sustainable level of spending.
So if you remember one thing, it should be this. You adjust to permanent shocks, but you finance temporary ones. That one simple rule has huge implications for how countries should think about managing their economies.
Now, our model's pretty cool so far, but it's missing a really important piece of the economic puzzle: investment. Up to now, we've only talked about people consuming and saving. So let's add an engine for growth into the mix and see what happens.
See, the simple model we've been using has a little problem. Its predictions about a country's trade balance, exports versus imports, they don't quite line up with what we see in the real world. But it turns out investment is that missing ingredient that makes the whole thing click and become way more realistic. So, for example, imagine a temporary drop in a country's productivity. Our old, simple model would just say, okay, the country saves a bit less to keep consumption steady. But the new model, with investment, adds another layer. It says, well, wait a second.
If productivity is down, it's also a pretty bad time to invest in new projects, right? So the country also invests less. And that double whammy, lower savings and lower investment, gives us a much richer and, frankly, a much more accurate picture of what's really going on.
Okay, so we've built this elegant model. But let's be honest, the real world is a lot messier. So you might be asking, what's the point of all this? Well, the point of a benchmark model like this isn't to be a perfect photograph of reality. It's meant to be like an ideal map. It shows us the best possible route, so we can better understand why we sometimes get lost.
And this ideal map, this first best world, is built on 3 really important pillars. First, perfect access to capital. Second, perfect certainty about what's coming next. And third, a perfect, unbreakable promise to always repay your debts. If you have all 3 of those things, the ideal path forward for an economy is crystal clear.
But in the real world, especially for developing countries, those pillars can be pretty shaky. They run into all sorts of things that economists call frictions. It might be really hard to get a loan on the international market. The future is anything but certain. And maybe political problems make it hard to guarantee that debts will be repaid. And all these frictions are what cause real-world economies to veer off that smooth, ideal path we saw in our model.
And that leaves us with one last really big question. This model gives us a beautiful, clear picture of what an economy should do to give its people the most stable life possible. So, if we know the ideal path, why is it so hard for real countries to actually follow it? The answer is hiding in those frictions we just talked about. Things like imperfect credit markets, massive uncertainty, and bad policies. And understanding those is the key to understanding how the world really works.